It's 3 a.m. The monitor goes off and you're awake before you're conscious. That specific parental alarm response that bypasses every stage of normal waking and deposits you directly into full alert. You get to the room in seconds. You've checked everything before you even fully arrive. The room is the right temperature. Nothing has fallen. Nobody is in there. Your baby is alone in a completely safe environment with a full stomach and a dry diaper, and they are screaming with an intensity that doesn't match any of those facts. Not fussing, not whimpering, screaming, the kind that makes the air in the room feel different. And you pick them up and within 30 seconds it stops, completely, like a switch, and they look up at your face with an expression that is somehow both devastated and relieved simultaneously. And you stand there in the dark at 3 a.m. holding a baby who's already drifting back towards sleep, and you think, what just happened in there? Because hunger doesn't explain it. Discomfort doesn't explain it. Bad dreams, the way we understand bad dreams, don't explain it either. What was happening inside that small body in the minutes before you arrived is something that researchers have spent decades trying to map. And what they found doesn't just explain the crying, it reframes what sleep itself is for a baby, and it will change what you feel in that room every time it happens. Let's start with the theories every exhausted parent cycles through at 3 a.m. because they're not wrong. They're just radically incomplete. Hunger, discomfort, overstimulation from the day, developmental leap, all of these are real. All of them can cause night waking. None of them explain the specific character of the cry, that particular quality of alarm that feels categorically different from a hungry cry, or an uncomfortable cry, the cry that sounds less like a request and more like a distress signal. Parents who have heard both know the difference intuitively, even when they can't articulate it. What they're responding to is real. The question is, what's generating it? The first piece of the answer requires understanding something about infant sleep that most people are never told, because it sounds counterintuitive. In 2019, researchers at the University of Geneva published findings on infant sleep architecture that reframed the entire conversation about why babies wake at night. What they documented was this: infants spend up to 50% of their total sleep time in REM, rapid eye movement sleep, compared to roughly 20 to 25% in healthy adults. That ratio is not a developmental inefficiency. It is not something babies grow out of as quickly as possible because it serves no purpose. The research team found that this extended REM period is one of the most neurologically active states an infant brain enters. More active in measurable ways than many waking states. The limbic system, the brain's emotional processing and memory consolidation center, runs at near waking intensity throughout infant REM. The visual cortex is processing, the hippocampus is filing, the amygdala, the structure responsible for generating emotional responses, particularly fear and alarm, is cycling through the emotional content of the day at full operational capacity. Your baby's brain at 3 a.m. is not resting. It is working harder than it works during most of the daylight hours, and the content it is working through is everything that happened. Every face, every sound, every moment of overstimulation or excitement or confusion or fear, all of it being processed, consolidated, filed. And sometimes the intensity of that processing breaches a threshold, and the baby wakes directly out of it. But here is what nobody tells you about what happens in the moment of that waking, because it is not what you imagine. When you wake from a dream, even an intense one, you have a set of cognitive tools available to you immediately. You know where you are, you know what time it is, you know the difference between what you were just experiencing and where you are now. You can orient, you can reality test, you can talk yourself down. A baby waking from high-intensity REM processing has none of those tools, zero, and the reason they don't is structural, not temporary, not a matter of experience or learning. It is a matter of which parts of their brain are developed and which are not. Researchers at the University of California, Davis, using neuroimaging data compiled across multiple infant studies, have documented the ratio that explains everything about nighttime crying. In the infant brain, the amygdala, the structure that generates fear, alarm and threat responses, is disproportionately large and fully functional, relative to overall brain size from birth. It is online, it is operational, it is sensitive and reactive in ways that will gradually moderate as other structures develop. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for regulating emotional responses, for providing context to alarm signals, for communicating to the amygdala that the threat has passed and the system can stand down, is barely online at all in the first year of life. It will not be meaningfully functional until somewhere between 18 months and 2 years, and it will not be fully developed until the mid-20s. What this means for a baby waking at 3 a.m. is not subtle. The part of the brain that generates the alarm is fully operational. The part of the brain that turns the alarm off does not yet exist in any functional sense. Your baby is not waking up scared. They are waking up as pure alarm, with no internal mechanism to resolve it. They are not experiencing what you experience when you have a bad dream and your heart is racing, but you know you're okay. They are experiencing the racing heart with no knowledge that okay is a possibility. Every single time. Now I need to tell you about research that quantified what that actually costs the body. Because it changes how you understand the urgency of what's happening in that crib. researchers at the University of Warwick conducting one of the most detailed studies of infant stress physiology ever published measured cortisol levels in infants across a range of stressful events and compared the profiles. What they found was that nighttime waking in infants, particularly waking that occurs out of high-intensity REM, produces cortisol elevations comparable to what the researchers classified as acute stress events, not background stress, not mild discomfort. Acute, the kind of cortisol spike that in adults is associated with genuine emergencies, a car that almost hits you, a fall, a moment of real fear. Your baby lying in their crib at 3 a.m. screaming is not mildly upset. They are, at a purely physiological level, in the middle of what their body registers as an emergency. The fact that the room is safe is information they do not have access to. The fact that you are coming is something they cannot know. In the space between the waking and your arrival, what is happening inside that body is the full biological signature of an acute threat response. And it resolves, completely, within seconds of your arrival, because you are not just comfort. You are the regulatory system they don't yet have internally. Here is where the research takes a turn that requires sitting with for a moment. Because, Doctor, James McKenna at the University of Notre Dame has spent 30 years studying something he calls the evolutionary context of infant sleep, and his findings reframe the nighttime waking not as a problem to be solved, but as a system behaving exactly as it was designed to behave in a context it was not designed for. For the overwhelming majority of human evolutionary history, infants did not sleep alone. The concept of a separate sleep space for an infant, a crib in a separate room, is historically and evolutionarily brand new. For somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 years of human existence, infants slept in physical contact with their primary caregiver, not nearby, in contact. And what McKenna's research found is that the infant nervous system was calibrated for that reality. Infant sleep architecture, including the frequency of night waking, the cortisol responses, the immediate cessation of alarm upon caregiver contact, all of it is consistent with a system that evolved to expect one thing when it woke in the dark: a body, warmth, heartbeat, breath. The system was never designed to determine whether it was safe by assessing the room temperature and the absence of visible threats. It was designed to determine whether it was safe by detecting the presence of its caregiver. When that presence is absent, the alarm fires, not because something is wrong with the baby, because the system is working perfectly in an environment it did not evolve for. That reframe matters because of what it changes about the response. If the night waking is a malfunction, the goal is to eliminate it. If the night waking is a correctly functioning alarm system operating in an unfamiliar context, the goal is something more nuanced. And the neuroscience of what happens when you arrive is one of the most important findings in all of infant sleep research. Dr. Alan Shaw at UCLA, whose work on affect regulation we have covered before in this channel, documented the neural sequence that follows caregiver arrival during a distress episode with a precision that changes what you understand about your own role. When you arrive and pick up the screaming baby and the screaming stops, what you are witnessing is not just comfort. You are watching co-regulation in its most literal form. Your nervous system, your heartbeat, your warmth, your voice, your breath rate is reaching into your baby's dysregulated nervous system and pulling it back toward baseline. You are functioning as an external prefrontal cortex. You are doing from the outside what the brain cannot yet do from the inside. And here is what the research found about what that does over time. Every time the sequence completes, waking, alarm, arrival, regulation, return to calm, the hippocampus logs it. Not abstractly, structurally. The neural prediction that safety follows alarm gets reinforced. The pathway that connects distress to resolution gets myelinated, gets faster, gets more automatic. The hundreds of times you drag yourself out of bed at 3 a.m. and go to that room are not just answering a cry. They are building a neural architecture. Specifically, they are building the architecture that the capacity for self-soothing will eventually run on. The baby who is responded to consistently does not become dependent on that response forever. They become a child whose nervous system learned, through repetition, that alarm ends, and a nervous system that knows alarm ends is a nervous system that can, eventually, end it from the inside. Now I have to tell you about the warning, because the research on the other side of this is important, and it belongs in this conversation stated plainly. There is a significant body of data on what happens when the acute stress response of nighttime waking goes unresolved for extended periods. Researchers measuring cortisol in infants during controlled crying protocols found that in the early nights of implementation, cortisol levels during crying episodes remained elevated even after the behavioral crying stopped, meaning the babies had stopped audibly signaling. The stress response had not stopped. It had simply ceased to produce an output. Behaviorally quiet is not the same as neurologically calm. This is not an argument against every form of graduated response sleep training. The research on properly implemented graduated approaches, where responses still occur but on a structured delay, shows different cortisol profiles than complete non-response. The data is not binary. But it is specific about one thing with enough consistency across enough studies to state clearly. Prolonged activation of the acute stress response without resolution, repeated across many nights in the first year of life, produces measurable effects on the developing stress response system, not temporary effects. The kind that show up in cortisol baseline measurements months later. The kind that Harvard's Center on the Developing Child places in the category of experiences that alter the architecture of the stress response system before that architecture is finished being built. The distinction the research draws is not between responding and not responding. It is between a nervous system that learns alarm ends and a nervous system that learns to stop signaling because signaling produces nothing. Those are not the same outcome. That cry at 3 a.m. is not manipulation. It is not a habit. It is not your baby deciding to ruin your sleep because they can. It is the most neurologically honest thing a partially developed human brain can do when it wakes in the dark with a fully operational alarm system and no internal means of turning it off. It is a reach, the most fundamental reach one nervous system can make toward another, and every time you answer it, every time you pull yourself out of sleep and walk down that hall and pick them up, you are not losing some battle of wills, you are not reinforcing bad behavior, you are making a deposit into a neurological account that your child will spend from for the rest of their life. The account that tells them, at a level beneath language, beneath memory, beneath anything they will ever be able to consciously access, that when the alarm fires, help arrives, that the dark ends, that they are not alone in it. You are building the foundation that every future moment of self-regulation, every time they calm themselves as a teenager, as an adult, in their own moments of 3 a.m. darkness, will stand on. It was built here, in this room, by you getting up again.